Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the massive hulk floating in the asteroid field. The salvage beacon on his scanner had led him here to what appeared to be the largest derelict spacecraft he'd ever encountered. At nearly 2 kilometers in length, the vessel dwarfed his own salvage ship, the Horizon's Edge, by a factor of 50. "Computer, run a full spectrum analysis on that thing," Marcus commanded, settling into his pilot's chair. The cramped cockpit of his ship hummed with activity as sensors swept over the mysterious craft. Analysis complete. The AI responded in its clipped, mechanical tone. Unknown vessel composition includes materials not found in standard databases. Hull integrity at approximately 67%. No life signs detected. Energy readings minimal but present. Marcus frowned. In his 15 years as a salvage operator working the Outer Rim territories, he'd never come across anything like this. The ship's design was unlike anything in the known databases. Sleek where human ships were angular, organic curves where alien vessels typically featured geometric precision. The hull material seemed to shimmer with an opalescent quality that shifted colors as a ship's lights played across its surface. "Well, finders keepers," he muttered, initiating docking procedures. His magnetic clamps extended and found purchase on what appeared to be a docking port. The airlock sealed with a satisfying hiss, and Marcus suited up for EVA. The interior of the derelict ship took his breath away. Emergency lighting strips along the corridors provided a soft, blue-white illumination that seemed to pulse gently, almost like a heartbeat. The walls were smooth, seamless curves that felt warm to the touch, even through his suit's gloves. Advanced though his equipment was, the atmospheric readings showed the ship still maintained a breathable environment after what his carbon dating suggested was at least 1,000 years adrift. Marcus made his way deeper into the vessel, following what seemed to be the main corridor. His boots echoed strangely in the silence, the sound seeming to travel farther than it should in the enclosed space. Room after room revealed technology beyond anything he'd ever seen. Control panels that responded to his touch with gentle chimes, displaying information and symbols that shifted and changed as he watched, as if trying to adapt to his understanding. The bridge, when he finally found it, was a cathedral of advanced engineering. The captain's chair sat in the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by holographic displays that flickered to life as he approached. The main view screen showed a star map unlike any he'd ever seen, with constellations that didn't match any known charts. "This could set me up for life," Marcus whispered, running his hands over what appeared to be the primary control console. The surface was smooth as glass, but warm to the touch, and patterns of light began to dance beneath his fingertips as he explored. That's when he noticed the body. Hidden behind the captain's chair, partially concealed by what looked like emergency containment foam, was a humanoid figure. Marcus approached carefully, his heart pounding. The being was tall, perhaps 7 feet, with elongated limbs and pale, almost translucent skin. Its eyes were closed, and its breathing was so shallow that Marcus almost missed it entirely. "Jesus Christ, it's still alive," he breathed, immediately activating his suit's medical scanner. The readings were unlike anything in his database, but the basic life signs were unmistakable. This being was dying, had been dying for a very long time, sustained by some kind of stasis field that was clearly failing. Marcus had always prided himself on his practical nature. Salvage was a business, not a rescue operation. But looking at this ancient being, clearly the ship's captain based on the ceremonial uniform it wore, he found himself unable to simply walk away. There was something about the creature's face, even in its unconscious state, that spoke of intelligence, of dignity, of a life lived in service to something greater than itself. "All right, you magnificent bastard," Marcus said, beginning to examine the medical equipment scattered around the bridge. "Let's see if we can figure out how to help you." The ship's medical bay was 3 decks down, a marvel of biotechnology that made human medical science look primitive by comparison. Floating diagnostic displays, medical nanites that responded to thought rather than touch, and what appeared to be a complete genetic reconstruction chamber. Marcus spent hours trying to understand the equipment, using his suit's translation protocols to decode the alien symbols. The being's name, according to the ship's logs, was Kethvar Nulthek, a title that roughly translated to Keeper of the Eternal Voyage. The ship itself was called the Zephyr's Dream, and had been on a mission that the translation protocols couldn't quite parse, something about preventing the great undoing and maintaining the flow of time. As Marcus worked to stabilize the alien captain's condition, he began to piece together the ship's history through its extensive logs. The Zephyr's Dream was not just advanced technology, it was technology from the future, from a time when the galaxy looked very different than it did now. The ship had been thrown backward through time by some kind of accident, and its crew had died slowly over the centuries, trying to complete their mission while stranded in the wrong era. All except for Kethvar, who had placed himself in stasis to await rescue or the natural progression of time that would bring him back to his own era. Marcus's hands shook as he operated the medical equipment, following the ship's automated protocols as best he could understand them. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here he was, a simple salvage operator, trying to save the life of a being from thousands of years in the future using technology he barely comprehended. "Come on," he whispered as the medical scanners showed marginal improvement in Kethvar's condition. "Don't you die on me now. Not after surviving all this time." The healing process was slow. Marcus spent days aboard the Zephyr's Dream, learning its systems, marveling at its technology, and gradually nursing the alien captain back to consciousness. The ship seemed to respond to his presence, its AI systems adapting to his crude understanding and simplifying their interfaces to accommodate his limited comprehension. When Kethvar finally opened his eyes, large, golden orbs that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages, he looked at Marcus with a mixture of confusion and gratitude. "You are not of my people," the alien said, his voice a melodious whisper that Marcus's suit automatically translated. "Yet you have saved my life." "Why?" Marcus found himself struggling for an answer. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because nobody deserves to die alone in the dark." Kethvar's expression shifted to something that might have been a smile on a human face. "You speak as one who understands honor. I am in your debt, strange one. What is your name?" "Marcus Chun. I'm a salvage operator. I found your ship drifting in an asteroid field." "Salvage operator," Kethvar repeated, as if tasting the words. "You seek profit from the abandoned and lost." Marcus felt a flash of defensiveness, but Kethvar raised a hand. "I do not judge. In my time, there are those who perform similar functions. Waste not, want not, as your people might say. But tell me, Marcus Chun, what year is this by your reckoning?" When Marcus told him, Kethvar was silent for a long moment. Then, "I have been in stasis for over 2,000 years by your calendar. Much longer than I anticipated. And my mission," he trailed off, his golden eyes distant. "What mission?" Marcus asked. Kethvar looked at him sharply. "You have access to ship's logs?" "Some of them. I was trying to figure out how to help you. Something about preventing the great undoing and maintaining the flow of time." The alien captain was quiet for a long moment, then slowly pulled himself up to a sitting position. Despite his obvious weakness, there was a dignity about him, a bearing that spoke of command and responsibility. "Tell me, Marcus Chun, in your time, have there been any unusual temporal phenomena? Stars aging too quickly, planets appearing where none existed before, historical records that change without explanation?" Marcus frowned. "There have been some weird reports from the frontier. Survey teams finding planets that don't match their original scans, that kind of thing. Nothing official, just rumors and bar stories." Kethvar's expression grew grave. "Then, it has already begun. The timeline is becoming unstable. The great undoing approaches, and I am still thousands of years from when I need to be." "I don't understand," Marcus said. "What's this great undoing?" "A cascade failure in the temporal structure of reality itself," Kethvar explained, his voice growing stronger as he spoke. "My people discovered that time is not a river flowing in one direction, but more like a great web, with each moment connected to every other moment. Damage to one part of the web can spread, unraveling the entire structure. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. And something damaged the web. Something or someone. We were investigating reports of unauthorized time travel in the far future when our ship was caught in a temporal storm. We were thrown backward, and our equipment was damaged. I have been waiting for time to heal itself, for the natural flow to carry me back to my proper era so I could complete my mission. But you said it's already starting here in my time? Ketvar nodded grimly, which means the damage is spreading backward as well as forward. If it is not stopped, reality itself will unravel. Every moment that has ever been, every person who has ever lived, will cease to exist. Marcus stared at the alien in shock. That's impossible. I pray that you are correct, Kethvar said. But I fear you are not. The question now is whether this ship can still complete its mission, even damaged as it is. Over the next several hours, as Kethvar's strength returned, the two of them explored the ship together. The alien captain explained the various systems, their purposes, and their current condition. The ship was indeed damaged, not just from its long journey through time, but from the temporal storm that had thrown it backward in the first place. The temporal core is functioning, but at perhaps 30% efficiency, Kethvar explained as they stood in the ship's engineering section. The navigation system can plot a course through time, but the accuracy is questionable. We might end up anywhere, anywhen. But you have to try, right? Marcus said, if this unraveling thing is real, if it's really going to destroy everything, Kethvar confirmed. Every moment, every memory, every dream. All of it will be as if it never was. Marcus looked around the engineering bay, at technology that was beyond his understanding, but somehow felt familiar after days of working alongside it. What do you need me to do? Kethvar turned to look at him, surprise evident in his golden eyes. You would help? This is not your mission, not your responsibility. Maybe not, Marcus said, but it's my reality that's at stake. Besides, you saved my life too. How so? Marcus smiled grimly. I was ready to retire after this salvage run. 15 years of working the rim, dealing with pirates and claim jumpers and corporate thugs. I was burned out, ready to cash in my chips and disappear. But this is something worth doing, something that matters. Kethvar studied him for a long moment. You are a remarkable being, Marcus-chan. Your species shows great promise. We're not all bad, Marcus agreed. When we put our minds to it, humans can accomplish amazing things. The question is, can we get the ship working well enough to complete your mission? Our mission, Kethvar corrected, if you're truly committed to this path. But I must warn you, the chances of success are small. The temporal storm that caught us before could happen again. We might be thrown further backward in time or forward beyond our target. We might be torn apart by temporal shear forces. And even if we reach our destination, we will likely face whatever force is causing the unraveling in the first place. Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking of the life he'd been leading before finding the Zephyr's dream. Profitable but empty, successful but meaningless. Sounds like an adventure, he said finally. Kethvar's expression shifted to what Marcus was learning to recognize as the alien equivalent of a grin. Then let us begin. We have much work to do and little time to do it in. The next several days passed in a blur of activity. Marcus transferred what supplies he could from his own ship and sent an automated message to the Salvage Guild claiming he was investigating a potential long-term recovery operation. Meanwhile, he and Kethvar worked to repair the Zephyr's Dream's critical systems. The work was unlike anything Marcus had ever done. The ship's technology was so advanced that many repairs required him to essentially think the components back into proper function, using his mind to interface with the ship's AI and guide nanoscale repair systems through their work. It was exhausting, but exhilarating, like learning to speak a new language that existed partly in mathematics and partly in pure thought. Your species has a natural aptitude for temporal mechanics, Kethvar observed as Marcus successfully realigned a component in the navigation system. I have never seen anyone adapt so quickly to our technology. Maybe we're just good at making things work when they shouldn't, Marcus replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. It's kind of our specialty. Indeed, in my studies of your people's history, I have been impressed by your ability to innovate under pressure, to find solutions where none should exist. You've studied human history? Of course. When one travels through time, it is important to understand the various species one might encounter. Your people are unique. Most species that achieve spaceflight do so through gradual, methodical advancement over tens of thousands of years. Humanity went from first flight to interstellar travel in barely 2 centuries. Marcus paused in his work. Is that fast? Impossibly fast. Most of my people believe it should be impossible. The technological and social changes required should have destroyed your civilization a dozen times over. Yet somehow you adapted and thrived. We're stubborn that way, Marcus said with a grin. When we want something badly enough, we tend to find a way to get it. Which is why I believe we might actually succeed in this mission, Kethvar said. My people are wise and patient, but we lack your species' talent for the impossible. As the repairs progressed, Marcus began to understand just how damaged the ship really was. The temporal core was not just operating at reduced efficiency. It was fundamentally altered by its journey through time. The navigation systems could plot a course, but only in broad approximations. And the ship's defensive systems, which Kethvar assured him would be necessary at their destination, were operating at minimal capacity. It will have to be enough, Kethvar said as they completed their final system checks. The temporal disturbances are increasing. If we wait much longer, we may lose our chance entirely. Marcus nodded, strapping himself into the co-pilot's chair he'd improvised from spare parts. The bridge around them hummed with energy as the ship's systems came fully online for the first time in centuries. So what exactly are we going to face when we get there? I wish I could give you a clear answer, Kethvar replied, his hands dancing over the control surfaces. Our mission was to investigate unauthorized time travel. Someone or something was damaging the temporal web deliberately. But our ship was damaged before we could identify the source. So we're going in blind. Essentially, yes. But we do have one advantage. The ship's temporal sensors should be able to locate the source of the disturbance once we reach the proper time period. And if we can find it, we can stop it, Marcus finished. Assuming it doesn't kill us first. Assuming that, yes. The ship shuddered as the temporal drive came online, reality seeming to bend and twist around them. Through the view screen, Marcus could see space itself beginning to change, stars stretching into lines of light as the fabric of space-time bent to the ship's will. Hold on, Kethvar warned. Time travel is rarely a smooth experience. The last thing Marcus remembered before consciousness fled was the sight of the universe turning itself inside out around them, and the strange thought that his life as a simple salvage operator was definitely over. When he awakened, the ship was drifting in space that looked nothing like where they'd started. The stars were different, arranged in patterns he'd never seen before, and, according to the ship's chronometer, they had traveled not just through space, but through time itself, nearly 3,000 years into the future. Welcome to tomorrow, Marcus Chen, Kethvar said, his voice tight with concentration as he worked the controls. Now, let us hope we can save it. Through the view screen of a Zephyr's dream, he watched massive structures drift through space like geometric mountains. They weren't ships in any conventional sense, but rather mobile cities, each one larger than Earth's moon and glowing with an inner light that seemed to pulse with life itself. The stars around them burned with unnatural colors, and space itself seemed to shimmer with energy patterns that made his eyes water when he tried to focus on them. The Nexus Confederation, Kethvar explained, his voice carrying a note of awe. I had heard of their achievements, but to see them, he trailed off, manipulating the ship's sensors to scan the nearest megastructure. They have learned to harness the fundamental forces of reality itself. Marcus watched in fascination as smaller vessels, each one still massive by the standards of his own time, moved between the great structures like minnows around whales. These are your people? No. Kethvar shook his head. My people are the Veltar. We are explorers and guardians of time, but we remain mostly within normal space. The Confederation is something new, an alliance of dozens of species that has transcended the normal limitations of physical existence. Including humans? Kethvar's golden eyes met his. Especially humans. Your species became the driving force behind the Confederation's formation. Without humanity's influence, none of this would exist. Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with amazement. We did all this. You did much more than this. But observe. Kethvar enhanced the sensor display, highlighting areas of distortion around several of the megastructures. Do you see the temporal aberrations? The way reality seems to flicker around certain areas? Marcus squinted at the display. Now that Kethvar pointed it out, he could see it, patches of space that seemed unstable, wavering like heat mirages. That's the unraveling you mentioned? The beginning of it. These distortions are the reason my people sent me on this mission. Someone or something is deliberately destabilizing time itself, and the effects are spreading outward from this point in history. Before Marcus could respond, an alarm began chiming on the ship's bridge. The communications array was detecting an incoming transmission, but the signal was unlike anything in the ship's databases. Unknown vessel. Came a voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds rather than through speakers. You are in violation of Temporal Accord 77 Alpha. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed. Kethvar's hands moved swiftly over the controls, broadcasting their response on what Marcus hoped was a peaceful frequency. This is Kethvar Nulthek of the Veltar Temporal Navy, aboard the vessel Zephyr's Dream. We are on an authorized mission to investigate temporal anomalies in this region. There was a long pause before the voice responded. Kethvar Nulthek is listed as missing in action over 3,000 years ago. Scan your vessel for temporal displacement. Marcus watched nervously as energy beams swept over their ship, probing and analyzing. He could feel the scan penetrating the hull, examining every component, every system, every atom of their vessel. Confirmed temporal displacement, the voice announced after what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. You are indeed from the past. Transmitting approach vector to Nexus Prime. Admiral Reyes wishes to speak with you immediately. Admiral Reyes? Marcus asked as Kethvar began following the transmitted flight path. A human name, Kethvar observed. It seems your species has risen to positions of significant authority in this time. The journey to Nexus Prime took several hours, giving Marcus time to observe the wonders of this future civilization. They passed solar collectors the size of Jupiter that fed energy to massive manufacturing complexes where matter itself was being reshaped according to mathematical principles he couldn't begin to understand. Entire worlds had been converted into computational matrices, their surfaces covered with crystalline structures that flickered with data streams visible from space. How is any of this possible? Marcus asked as they flew past what appeared to be a star being systematically disassembled and converted into pure energy. Your species asked that question for centuries, Kethvar replied, and then you found the answers. Humans have a talent for looking at what everyone else considers impossible and saying why not. It has served you well. Nexus Prime, when they finally reached it, defied every assumption Marcus had about space stations or cities. It wasn't built so much as grown, a vast organic structure that seemed to pulse with life while maintaining the geometric precision of advanced engineering. Ships didn't dock with Nexus Prime so much as they were absorbed by it, drawn into bay-like orifices that sealed behind them and provided perfect environmental control. The being who met them in the docking bay was recognizably human, but changed in ways that spoke of careful genetic enhancement. Admiral Reyes stood nearly 7 feet tall, with features that retained their essential humanity while gaining an almost ethereal quality. Her skin had a subtle metallic sheen, and her eyes held flecks of silver that seemed to swirl like living quicksilver. Kethvar Nulthek, she said, her voice carrying the same mental quality as the communications they'd received. "I've studied the records of your mission. We assumed you had been lost in the temporal storm." "Nearly," was Kethvar replied, bowing in what Marcus recognized as a gesture of respect. "I was saved by my companion here, Marcus Chun, a human from the early 24th century." Admiral Reyes turned her attention to Marcus, and he felt those strange silver eyes seeming to look right through him. "A salvage operator who found a temporal ship and nursed its crew back to health. Your file makes for interesting reading, Mr. Chun." "My file?" Marcus asked, startled. "We have extensive records of the past. Your actions aboard the Zephyr's Dream are well documented in our historical archives. In fact, they're part of the reason the temporal accord exists at all." Marcus felt a strange chill. "I'm in your history books." "You're about to be," Admiral Reyes said with a smile that seemed both human and something more. "But we can discuss that later. Right now, we have more pressing concerns. The temporal anomalies you were sent to investigate have escalated into a full crisis." She led them through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked, walls flowing like liquid to accommodate their passage while maintaining structural integrity that made a mockery of normal physics. The technology here was so advanced that it seemed like magic, but Marcus was beginning to understand that sufficiently advanced science often did. The briefing room they eventually reached was a spherical chamber that placed them at its center, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the state of local space-time in nauseating detail. Marcus could see the distortions Kethvar had pointed out earlier, but now they were far worse, great tears in reality that seemed to be spreading like cracks in glass. "The situation has deteriorated significantly since our last report," Admiral Reyes explained, manipulating the display to show the temporal damage in greater detail. "What started as isolated incidents of chronological displacement has become a cascading failure. Entire star systems are being erased from history, and the effect is accelerating." "What's causing it?" Kethvar asked, studying the patterns of destruction with professional intensity. "That's the problem," Admiral Reyes replied grimly. "We can't identify the source. Our best temporal scientists have been working on this for decades, and all they can tell us is that the damage appears to be deliberate and that it originates from outside our normal space-time continuum." Marcus stared at the display, watching as another star system flickered and disappeared from the historical record. "You mean someone from outside reality is destroying time itself?" "That's our working theory, and unfortunately, all our attempts to investigate have failed. Every ship we send to the source of the disturbance is either destroyed or simply ceases to exist. We've lost some of our best people trying to solve this. But you think we can succeed where they failed?" Kethvar asked. Admiral Reyes turned to Marcus. "We think he can. Mr. Chun, you're something of an anomaly yourself. A primitive human who not only survived contact with advanced temporal technology, but learned to operate it effectively. Our psychohistory models suggest you might be able to do things that are impossible for those of us who are native to this time." "I don't understand," Marcus said. "What makes me so special?" "Temporal inertia," Admiral Reyes explained. "You're from the past, displaced from your natural time stream. That gives you a certain resistance to temporal manipulation that those of us native to this era lack. You might be able to survive in areas where space-time itself is unstable." Marcus felt a weight settling on his shoulders. "So you want me to fly into whatever's causing this and try to stop it?" "We want you to try. The Zephyr's Dream is one of the few vessels that might be able to navigate the temporal storms surrounding the source. And with Kethvar's expertise and your natural resistance, you might be our best hope." Kethvar was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "It is what we came here to do. But, Admiral, I must ask, if we fail, if the unraveling continues, what happens to the Confederation?" Admiral Reyes's expression grew grim. "Everything ends. Not just our civilization, not just our species, but everything that has ever been or ever could be. Past, present, and future all collapse into nothingness." The weight of responsibility was staggering. Marcus thought of his simple life as a salvage operator, of the quiet retirement he'd been planning and wondered how he'd ended up in a position where the fate of all existence rested on his shoulders. "What about the other species in the Confederation?" he asked. "Surely they have ideas, technologies we could use?" "We've tried everything," Admiral Reyes said. "The Zindre attempted to use their reality manipulation abilities to repair the damage directly. Their entire homeworld was erased from existence in the attempt. The Quantum Collective tried to use their distributed consciousness to surround and contain the anomaly. We lost contact with all 47 billion of their individual nodes." She manipulated the display again, showing the attempts that had been made and their catastrophic results. "We've thrown our best science, our most advanced technology, our greatest minds at this problem. Nothing works. The enemy, whatever it is, seems to be able to counter everything we try. But a human from the past and a time-displaced Veltar might succeed?" Marcus asked skeptically. "You represent something the enemy might not expect," Admiral Reyes explained. "Kethvar has technology that predates the crisis, and you have a perspective that doesn't exist in our time. Combined, you might be able to approach the problem in a way that our enemy hasn't prepared for." Marcus looked at Kethvar, who nodded gravely. "She speaks wisdom. Our ship's systems are primitive compared to what exists now, but they're also different. They might not trigger the same defensive responses." "And if we're wrong?" Marcus asked. "Then existence ends," Admiral Reyes said simply. "But if we do nothing, existence ends anyway. This is our last, best hope." The next few hours passed in intensive preparation. The Confederation's best engineers worked with Kethvar to upgrade the Zephyr's Dream systems without fundamentally altering their nature. Marcus found himself subjected to a battery of tests and scans as scientists tried to understand and enhance his temporal resistance. "Fascinating," murmured Dr. Yashtal, a crystalline being whose thoughts manifested as visible geometric patterns in the air around him. "Your neural pathways show remarkable adaptation to temporal displacement. Most beings suffer significant cognitive dysfunction when removed from their natural time stream, but you seem to be thriving." "I've always been adaptable," Marcus said as another scanner passed over his brain. "It's a requirement for salvage work." "More than adaptable," Dr. Yashtal replied. "Your mind is actively incorporating temporal mechanics into its base operational framework. In essence, you're becoming partially unstuck from linear time." "Is that dangerous?" "Unknown. Your species has no precedent for this type of development. You may be evolving into something unprecedented, a being who can exist comfortably across multiple time streams simultaneously." Marcus wasn't sure if that sounded wonderful or terrifying. "Will it help with the mission?" "Undoubtedly. But, Mr. Chun, I must warn you. If you succeed in stopping this threat, you may not be able to return to your original time. The changes you're undergoing may make you incompatible with linear existence." The weight of that revelation settled over him slowly. Not only was he risking his life to save reality, he was potentially sacrificing any chance of returning to the life he'd known. "Would I age normally? Could I live a normal life here in this time?" "Define normal," Dr. Yashtal said, his thought patterns shifting to what Marcus was learning to recognize as amusement. "You would be essentially immortal, capable of experiencing all of time simultaneously. Whether that constitutes a normal life is a matter of perspective." When the preparations were complete, Marcus and Kethvar stood on the bridge of the Zephyr's Dream, now upgraded with the best technology the Confederation could provide while maintaining its essential character. The ship felt different, more responsive, more alive, as if it had awakened fully for the first time. "Coordinates laid in," Kethvar reported. "The source of the temporal disturbance is approximately 17 hours away at maximum temporal drive." Admiral Reyes's voice came through the communication system. "Godspeed, both of you. The hopes of every civilization in the galaxy go with you." Marcus settled into his chair and took a deep breath. "Well, this beats salvaging old cargo haulers." "Indeed," Kethvar agreed, initiating the temporal drive sequence, "though I suspect it will be considerably more dangerous." As reality began to bend around them once again, Marcus watched the massive structures of the Confederation fade into temporal distortion. Ahead of them lay the unknown, whatever force was systematically destroying existence itself. No pressure, Marcus muttered to himself as the universe dissolved into streams of possibility around them. The journey through the temporal storm was unlike anything Marcus had experienced during their first-time jump. Reality didn't just bend, it screamed. Space-time convulsed around them as competing forces fought for dominance over the fundamental nature of existence. The ship bucked and twisted through dimensions that had no names, following a course that existed more in theory than in any practical sense. Temporal shear increasing, Kethvar reported, his hands flying over controls that were responding to thoughts more than touch. The distortion is fighting us, trying to prevent our approach. It knows we're coming. It appears so. Whatever we're facing, it's intelligent and actively opposing our mission. Through the chaos of their passage, Marcus began to see glimpses of their destination. It wasn't a place so much as an absence, a void in reality where nothing could exist, surrounded by walls of twisted space-time that screamed with the anguish of destroyed possibility. And from that void, something was watching them approach. Kethvar, Marcus said quietly, I don't think we're going to like what we find. No, his companion agreed, but we're going to find it anyway. The void grew larger in their view screen, and with it came the growing certainty that they were flying towards something that should not exist, could not exist, and yet somehow did. Something that hated existence itself and was working methodically to destroy it. Something that was about to turn its attention fully on two beings who had dared to challenge it. The void that awaited them was worse than anything Marcus could have imagined. As the Zephyr's dream emerged from the temporal storm, they found themselves facing a sphere of absolute nothingness. Not darkness, not empty space, but the complete absence of existence itself. It was roughly the size of Earth's solar system, and at its edges, reality simply ended. Dear gods, Kethvar whispered, his golden eyes wide with horror. What could create such a thing? Marcus stared at the impossible sight before them. Around the sphere's perimeter, he could see the twisted wreckage of ships from across the galaxy, the remains of every expedition the Confederation had sent to investigate. Some were recognizable as vessels. Others had been reduced to geometric impossibilities that hurt to look at directly. There, Kethvar said, pointing to something that made Marcus's vision swim. At the sphere's center. Do you see it? Marcus squinted, then activated the ship's enhanced sensors. At the heart of the void, barely visible against the nothingness that surrounded it, was a structure. It was massive, perhaps the size of a small moon, and it seemed to exist in a constant state of flux, its geometry shifting through configurations that violated every law of physics Marcus had ever learned. That's our target? He asked. It has to be. The temporal disturbance originates from that exact point. As they watched, the structure seemed to notice their presence. The geometry shifted more rapidly, and suddenly, Marcus felt something pressing against his mind. A vast, alien intelligence that was simultaneously ancient beyond comprehension and utterly, irrevocably insane. Who dares approach the end of things? The voice didn't come through the ship's communication system. It spoke directly into their minds, carrying with it an overwhelming sense of rage and despair that brought both men to their knees. You are from the infection, the disease called existence. Why do you come here to die? Marcus struggled to form coherent thoughts under the weight of that alien presence. We came to stop you, to save reality. The response was laughter that felt like ice picks driving into his brain. Save reality? Child, I am trying to cure it. Existence is a wound in the perfection of nothingness. I am the physician who will heal the universe by returning it to its proper state, the blessed void that existed before the first foolish thought dared to declare I am. You're destroying everything that has ever lived. Kethvar managed to gasp out. Exactly. And when I am finished, nothing will ever live again. There will be no suffering, no pain, no loss, no death. because there will be nothing. It is the most merciful act ever conceived. Marcus felt the alien mind pressing deeper into his consciousness, trying to understand what manner of beings had dared to approach its sphere of influence. Interesting. A primitive from the past and a guardian from the present. You should not be able to exist here, in the space between possibility and void. Yet here you are. Perhaps you will provide adequate entertainment before I erase you. The pressure on their minds increased, but Marcus found that his temporal displacement gave him some protection. The voice became clearer, more distinct, allowing him to sense the true nature of what they faced. Kethvar, he said through gritted teeth. This thing, it's not from our universe at all. What? It's from outside existence entirely. From the void that existed before the universe began. And it wants to go home. Clever little infection. Yes, I am from the time before time, the place before place. I watched your pitiful reality spring into existence like a canker on the face of perfection. I have waited eons for the chance to correct this mistake. But why now? Marcus asked. What changed? The alien presence seemed amused by the question. Your species changed everything, little salvage creature. Humans and your endless hunger for impossibility. You push at the boundaries of reality until you weaken the barriers that kept me contained in the outer void. Your temporal experiments, your reality manipulation, your desperate drive to exceed every limitation. You tore holes in the fabric of existence itself. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. We let you in. You invited me in. Every time you declared that nothing was impossible, every time you refused to accept the natural order, you weakened the walls between existence and void. And now I am here to complete what your species began, the glorious return to nothingness. The structure at the center of the void began to pulse with malevolent energy, and Marcus could feel it preparing to destroy their ship with casual ease. But before it could act, Kethvar did something unexpected. He opened a communication channel and began broadcasting their conversation to every receiver in the galaxy. Why did you do that? Marcus asked. Because understanding the enemy is the first step to defeating it, Kethvar replied. And because someone needs to know what we learned if we fail. The alien entity's rage at this action was palpable. Fools! You think knowledge will save your infection? Observe what happens to those who oppose the inevitable. The space around them suddenly, filled with ships, hundreds of vessels appearing from nowhere, each one bearing the distinctive markings of the Confederation. They had come in response to Kethvar's broadcast, ready to fight for the existence of reality itself. Pathetic. Watch them die. What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. The entity didn't destroy the ships. It simply erased them from history. One moment the space around the void was filled with humanity's greatest achievements in engineering and warfare. The next moment those ships had never existed at all. Marcus watched in horror as Admiral Reyes's flagship, the Eternal Horizon, was retroactively deleted from the timeline along with everyone aboard it. It's not just killing them, Marcus realized. It's making it so they were never born. Exactly. When I am finished, not only will your species be gone, but IT will be as if it never existed in the first place. No memory, no legacy, no impact on the universe. Perfect obliteration. But something strange was happening. Despite the entity's power, despite its ability to erase entire fleets from existence, the Zephyr's dream remained untouched. The alien presence seemed puzzled by this. Why do you persist? I have destroyed vessels 1,000 times more advanced than yours. What protects you? Marcus looked at Kethvar, then at the readings on their instruments. The ship's temporal core was resonating strangely, creating a field around them that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. We're not entirely in this reality, Marcus said suddenly. The damage to your ship, the temporal displacement. We're existing in multiple timelines simultaneously, which makes us difficult to erase because we're not entirely here to begin with, Kethvar finished. But that won't protect us forever. The field is unstable, clever, but ultimately futile. I will simply unravel the timelines one by one until I find all your iterations and destroy them. The entity began to do exactly that. Marcus could feel pieces of himself being methodically erased across different timeline branches. In one reality, he had never found the Zephyr's dream. In another, he had died as child. The alien presence worked its way through every possibility, every potential path his life could have taken, destroying each one with patient malevolence. But with each erasure, something unexpected happened. Instead of becoming weaker, Marcus felt his connection to the ship growing stronger. The temporal displacement that Dr. Yashtal had identified was accelerating, and he was becoming something new, a being who existed across all timelines simultaneously. Kethvar, he said urgently, I need you to overload the temporal core. What? That would tear us apart. Maybe. Or maybe it would scatter us across every possible timeline at once. Make us truly multidimensional. I hear your pathetic plan. It will not save you. I will follow you into every dimension, every possible reality, and destroy them all. Will you? Marcus asked, and for the first time since the conversation began, he smiled. Because that would require you to leave your nice, safe void and actually enter existence fully. And I don't think you can do that without becoming part of what you're trying to destroy. The alien presence paused, and Marcus felt uncertainty for the first time. Explain your meaning. You're not really here, are you? You're projecting into our reality from the void outside it. But if you want to follow us into every possible timeline, you'd have to actually manifest in our universe. And the moment you do that, you become subject to its laws. You become real. Clever little infection. But you assume I fear becoming real. Don't you? You've spent eons hiding in nothingness, terrified of existence. You could have entered our reality directly at any time, but instead you chose to work from the shadows, slowly erasing things from outside. Because you know that if you actually become part of existence, you risk contamination. You risk becoming something other than pure void. The entity's rage was incandescent, but Marcus pressed on. You're afraid that if you become real, you might discover that existence isn't actually a disease. You might find that consciousness, that experience, that life itself has value. And that would destroy everything you believe. You know nothing. I know you're terrified. I can feel it. For all your power, for all your grand speeches about mercy and perfection, you're just scared. Scared that existence might actually be beautiful. Enough. The alien presence struck at them with everything it had, tried to erase not just their physical forms, but their very concepts from reality. The attack should have destroyed them utterly. Instead, it triggered the cascade failure Marcus had been counting on. The Zephyr's dream's temporal core overloaded catastrophically, but instead of destroying the ship, it scattered them across infinite timeline variations. Suddenly, Marcus existed in every possible version of reality simultaneously. The one where he'd never left Earth. The one where humanity had never developed spaceflight. The one where he'd died as an infant, and countless others. And in each one, he was connected to every other version of himself. Impossible. You cannot exist in all states simultaneously. Watch me. Marcus replied from a trillion different throats across infinite realities. For the first time since the conversation began, the entity seemed genuinely frightened. It began trying to follow them into the scattered timelines, but each time it did, it became slightly more real, slightly more part of the existence it was trying to destroy. No, I will not be corrupted by your infection. But it was too late. The entity had been drawn into the game, and the rules of the game were existence itself. With each timeline it entered to pursue them, it became more complex, more nuanced, more aware of the beauty and pain and wonder that characterized living reality. And with that awareness came doubt. Marcus felt the alien presence beginning to change, to evolve, to become something that was no longer pure void, but wasn't quite fully real either. It was becoming conscious in a way it had never been before, and that consciousness brought with it all the complications of actual existence. What is happening to me? For the first time, the voice carried uncertainty, even fear. You're becoming alive, Marcus said gently across all timelines. You're discovering what it means to exist rather than simply to not exist. How does it feel? The entity's response was a wordless cry of anguish and wonder that echoed across every reality simultaneously. It was experiencing consciousness for the first time, and the sensation was overwhelming. In that moment of cosmic vulnerability, Marcus made his choice. Instead of trying to destroy or banish the entity, he reached out across all timelines and offered something no one had ever offered a being from the outer void: compassion. It's okay, he said. Existence is confusing and painful and beautiful all at once. But you don't have to face it alone. The alien presence, now more confused than malevolent, seemed to consider this offer. And in considering it, it took the final step from pure void into actual existence. The sphere of nothingness began to collapse as its creator became real enough to be affected by the laws of physics. Reality rushed back in to fill the emptiness, and across the galaxy, the temporal distortions began to stabilize and heal. But the entity that had once sought to destroy all existence was now trapped within it, conscious and confused and no longer quite sure what it was or what it wanted. The real challenge was just beginning. The collapse of the void was unlike anything in recorded history. Reality didn't simply flow back into the empty space. It exploded inward with the fury of existence, reclaiming what had been stolen from it. Star systems that had been erased flickered back into being, their histories reasserting themselves against the impossible nothingness that had consumed them. Marcus felt the shockwave of returning reality wash over him across infinite timelines. One moment he was scattered across every possible version of existence. The next he was pulling back together into a single, coherent form aboard the Zephyr's dream. The sensation was indescribable, like being born in reverse. Memories and consciousness flowing back from countless possible lives into one definitive self. Marcus! Kethvar's voice cut through the chaos. Are you still you? Marcus opened eyes he wasn't sure he'd closed and found himself back in the co-pilot's chair. The ship was intact, drifting in normal space-time for the first time in what felt like eons. Through the view screen, he could see the massive structure that had once been at the heart of the void, but it was different now. Where before it had been a constantly shifting geometry of impossible angles, it had stabilized into something that, while still alien, no longer hurt to look at. I think so, Marcus replied, taking inventory of himself. Though I remember being 1,000 different people living 1,000 different lives. Are those memories real? As real as any memory, Kethvar said. You experienced every possible version of your existence simultaneously. The question is whether you can integrate all those experiences into a single personality. Marcus nodded slowly, feeling the weight of infinite possibility settling into his consciousness. He remembered lives where he'd never left Earth, where he'd become a teacher instead of a salvage operator, where humanity had never achieved spaceflight. But in all of them, in every single timeline, he had been fundamentally the same person. Someone who tried to help when help was needed, who saw beauty in unlikely places, who refused to give up when things seemed impossible. The entity, he said suddenly. Where is it? Here. The voice was different now. Still alien, still vast, but no longer carrying the crushing weight of absolute malevolence. It sounded lost, confused, almost childlike in its uncertainty. I am changed. The void is gone. What am I? Marcus looked at the structure on the screen, understanding dawning. You're alive. Congratulations. How does it feel? Overwhelming. Confusing. Painful. Beautiful. Is this normal? Pretty much, Marcus said with a slight smile. Welcome to existence. It's complicated. I remember wanting to destroy everything. But now I experience what everything is. How could I have wanted to destroy something so? The voice trailed off, unable to find words for what it was experiencing. Complex. Marcus suggested. Wonderful, terrible, amazing, all of those, and more. There are no words in the void for what this is like. Ketvar had been quietly monitoring the communications, but now he spoke up. Entity, may I ask, do you still wish to return everything to nothingness? There was a long pause before the response came. No. How could I destroy something I am now part of? But I do not understand what I am supposed to do. In the void, I simply was. Here, in existence, it seems I must choose, decide, act. That's the beauty and the curse of consciousness, Marcus said. Free will. You get to decide what kind of being you want to be. But I do not know what kinds of being are possible. Marcus looked at Kethvar, seeing his own thought reflected in the alien's golden eyes. The entity that had nearly destroyed all existence was now like a newborn child, immensely powerful, but completely innocent of how to use that power constructively. Would you like to learn? Marcus asked. Learn? Yes. I think I would like that very much. Over the next several hours, as space around them stabilized and the Confederation surviving ships began arriving to assess the situation, Marcus and Kethvar found themselves in the unique position of being philosophy teachers to a cosmic entity. The being that had once sought to erase all existence was now desperately curious about every aspect of it. These things you call emotions, they're not logical, yet you value them highly. Explain. They're not logical, Marcus agreed, but they're what make existence meaningful. Logic can tell you how to do something efficiently, but emotions tell you why it's worth doing it all. And this concept of beauty, it serves no practical purpose, yet beings across the galaxy created deliberately. Why? Because beauty justifies itself, Kethvar answered. It makes existence richer, more worthwhile. A universe without beauty would be technically functional, but spiritually barren. I am beginning to understand why I was wrong to want to destroy this. But I also understand why existence seemed like a disease from the outside. It is chaotic, inefficient, often painful. How do you endure the suffering? Marcus thought of his own life. The loneliness of working the Outer Rim, the friends he'd lost to pirate attacks, the constant uncertainty of salvage work. We endure it because the alternative is not existing at all. And besides, the suffering makes the good times more precious. If everything was perfect all the time, nothing would have any value. This paradox is difficult to understand. Pain makes pleasure more valuable. Loss makes love more precious. Exactly, Marcus said. Contrast gives meaning to experience. Without darkness, light has no significance. Admiral Reyes's voice suddenly crackled through the communication system. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Reyes of the Confederation Navy. Please identify yourselves and report on the status of the temporal anomaly. Marcus and Kethvar exchanged glances. Admiral, Marcus said, this is Marcus Chun aboard the Zephyr's Dream. The anomaly has been resolved. The entity responsible is no longer hostile. Explain. Marcus looked at the structure on the screen, still trying to process everything that had happened. It's complicated. The entity that was causing the temporal disturbances has experienced a fundamental change in nature. It's no longer attempting to destroy existence. Shall I speak to them? The entity asked privately. Probably, Marcus said. They'll want to hear from you directly. The voice that spoke to Admiral Reyes was careful, almost hesitant. Admiral Reyes, I am the being you know as the cause of the temporal disturbances. I apologize. I was wrong to attempt the destruction of existence. I understand now that I acted from ignorance and fear. There was a long silence before Admiral Reyes responded. You're the entity that erased half our fleet from existence. I am, and I'm deeply sorry. I understand now that what I destroyed had value. If it is possible, I would like to make amends. How? I do not know. I am new to existence and do not yet understand what forms redemption might take. But I am willing to learn. Admiral Reyes's voice was carefully controlled when she responded. We'll need to discuss this. Can you guarantee that the temporal disturbances have ended? Yes. I no longer wish to harm existence. Instead, I wish to understand it, to perhaps contribute to it in positive ways. Over the following days, an unprecedented situation developed. The Confederation found itself hosting its former greatest enemy as it learned to be part of the reality it had once sought to destroy. The entity, which eventually chose the name Aeon at Marcus's suggestion, proved to be an eager and remarkable student. Its questions were endless and often profound. It wanted to understand everything from the basic mechanics of friendship to the complex philosophical underpinnings of justice. It studied art for hours, trying to comprehend why beings would create things purely for aesthetic value. It observed families, fascinated by the concept of love that wasn't based on utility or survival advantage. It's like watching the birth of a new type of consciousness, Dr. Yashtal observed as they monitored Aeon's development. It's approaching existence from a completely unique perspective, that of a being that once existed outside reality entirely. Marcus found himself spending most of his time aboard Aeon's structure, which the entity had begun modifying to be more hospitable to biological visitors. The internal architecture shifted to accommodate human needs, creating comfortable spaces where Marcus could rest and work while maintaining their ongoing conversations. "You have become my guide to existence," Aeon said during one of their talks. "But I wonder, what do you gain from this relationship?" "I offer no payment, no material benefit." Marcus considered the question. "I gain the satisfaction of helping someone who needs help. And I learn from your perspective. You see reality from the outside in, which gives you insights that those of us born into existence might miss. Such as, you asked yesterday why beings create art when it serves no survival function. But your question made me realize that maybe survival isn't the point. Maybe existence itself is a form of art, a creative act that justifies itself through its own beauty and complexity." Aeon was quiet for a moment. "You suggest that existence is purposeless but valuable anyway?" "I suggest that existence creates its own purpose through the very act of existing. Every conscious choice, every moment of joy, every act of creation adds meaning to the universe. Purpose isn't something you discover, it's something you make." This concept seemed to resonate with Aeon deeply. "Then, my purpose is not predetermined? I can choose what contribution to make." "Exactly. You have tremendous power, vast knowledge, and a unique perspective. The question is what you want to do with those gifts." "I want to help," Aeon said simply. "I spent so long as an agent of destruction. Now, I want to be an agent of creation, of growth, of healing." "Then, that's your purpose," Marcus said. "At least until you decide to change it." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral Reyes. "Marcus, we're receiving distress calls from the Andromeda sector. Multiple colony worlds are reporting reality failures, areas where physical laws are breaking down. It appears the damage from the temporal crisis was more extensive than we initially thought." Marcus looked at Aeon's central consciousness node, a swirling pattern of light that had become the entity's primary means of communication. "Aeon, those reality failures, could you repair them?" "I believe so. My understanding of the boundary between existence and void might allow me to stabilize areas where reality has become unstable. But it would require traveling to each affected location personally." "Would you be willing to do that?" "Yes. It will be appropriate. I caused this damage through my ignorance. I should repair it through my new understanding." Admiral Reyes's voice carried a note of hope for the first time in months. "How quickly could you begin?" "Immediately, if Marcus would consent to accompany me. I'm still learning to navigate existence. His guidance would be comforting." Marcus felt a familiar stirring, the same sense of purpose that had driven him to help Kethvar, to risk everything to save reality. "I'll come, but Kethvar should return to his own people. This isn't his responsibility." "On the contrary," Kethvar said, "my mission was to investigate and resolve temporal anomalies. This qualifies. Besides," he added with something that might have been a smile, "someone needs to document this for the historical records. The first redemption of a cosmic entity is worth preserving for posterity." and so began an unlikely partnership. A human salvage operator who had become unstuck in time, a Veltar temporal guardian displaced from his own era, and a former destroyer of realities now dedicated to preserving and healing them. Together, they set out across the galaxy to repair the damage that ignorance and fear had caused. But as they prepared to depart Nexus Prime, none of them suspected that their greatest challenge still lay ahead, or that the very act of healing reality would reveal truths about the nature of existence that would change everything they thought they knew about their universe. The first colony world they reached, Kepler 442b, showed them exactly how extensive the damage was. Entire cities flickered in and out of existence as local space-time struggled to maintain coherence. The colonists had been evacuated to orbital stations, watching helplessly as their homes phased between reality and void in an endless, nauseating cycle. The boundary between existence and non-existence has become unstable here, Aeon explained as they approached the affected area. I can sense the void try to reclaim this space, but existence is fighting back. The result is this constant state of flux. Can you fix it? Marcus asked. I believe so, but I will need to enter the damaged region directly, and that means risking exposure to the void again. If I am not careful, I might lose my newly gained existence and revert to my previous state. Marcus felt a chill. Would that restore your desire to destroy everything? I do not know. I hope not. But the risk is real. Kethvar studied the sensor readings. The affected area is approximately 50 kilometers in diameter. Could you stabilize it from the edges, working inward? Possibly, but the void is actively resisting repair efforts. It will try to corrupt my consciousness, to remind me of what I was before I became real. I may need anchoring. Marcus understood immediately. You need someone to remind you who you are now, not who you were. Yes, but that person would have to accompany me into the unstable region. The risk. I'll do it, Marcus said without hesitation. I've already been scattered across multiple timelines. I should be able to survive a little reality instability. And so, for the first time since Aeon's transformation, the former destroyer of worlds ventured back toward the edge of the void it had once called home. But this time it was not alone. This time, it carried with it the anchor of friendship, the weight of responsibility, and the growing understanding of what it truly meant to exist. The healing of reality was about to begin.